morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Bonafide Man Podcast. I'm Dave Johnson, and again, 2 weeks in a row, Marty is out and cannot be here today, but he will be here back next week, hot and heavy, ready to go. He and his wife were traveling and had some car issues, so they're kind of out of pocket. But anyway, today is a guy I've been chasing for quite a while to get on our show. I really love what Jeff Tiegs does, and just a little introduction for Jeff. Jeff was a military man. He served, I believe, 25 years in the Army, Delta Force, retired out as a Delta Force Lieutenant Colonel. I think he left with 5 Bronze Stars and a Silver Star with Valor, I believe, I'm not mistaken. He founded an organization called Skull Games, and they use open source information to track down and hunt predators and pedophiles and the like. And he just does a fantastic job. He's also an author, and he's the husband to Julianne and father to Aaron and Jonah, if I'm not mistaken. So with all that being said, welcome, Jeff. Great to have you on, brother.
Thanks, Dave. I didn't realize you've been chasing me this whole time, so I'll try to be easier to catch next time.
Yeah.
And thanks for including my wife and boys. They're my pride and joy. I don't talk about them often because, like, podcasts, by the time you get to that point. But yeah, there is nothing I'm more proud of than 37 years married, which is the hardest thing I've ever done. Again, I think this is one of those things, marriage. It's like, you guys, if you don't think it's going to be hard, whew. Fatherhood to me is a cakewalk compared to marriage. But fatherhood, my 2 sons, they're my heroes, man. They are
awesome.
Absolutely beautiful, wonderful, kind, strong young men, that make me have a lot of hope for the future, regardless of what's happening around us. So thank you for including them in that.
Well, if more kids had parents that cared and felt like you did, I think we'd be a lot better off. So many parents.
Dude, you're just pushing my buttons right away, aren't you? Because this is it's hard. This is a hard thing to say. A lot of parents don't care.
Yeah.
And a lot of parents don't care enough. Now, the work that I do in sexual exploitation, like you're talking about parents that don't care. They're selling their children to get high. They're selling their children, or they're having children to introduce them into the sex trade. I mean, that's a level that's like almost beyond the pale. That's like a demonic level. But then there's almost the natural American level, which is parents are chasing money. These dual income households that are farming out their kids from the time they can crawl until the time they go to college. And it's like, Dave, I've sat down with people, and they have a daughter. Again, it's usually the girls that we're dealing with, who is cutting herself, and she's in with the wrong crowd, and she's in danger of really doing some irreparable damage in the course of her life. And I tell them, there's only one thing for you to do, and that is stop everything you're doing now. Stop traveling for work. Stop doing X, Y, and Z, and you need to stay home with your kid. And I would get in the car, and I would drive out to the woods, and I would camp with my kid for a month. Like, you have nothing else to do except prioritize your child. I've had this discussion, Dave, probably 15 to 20 times in the last 10 years. You want to know how many parents took me up on that? 0. Because they can't see past their job as a banker or an insurance salesman or whatever it is they're doing. Yep. And they are sacrificing their children on the altar of money and ambition and keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, we're starting off this podcast with some serious poopy pants, but we're also here to speak truth. And parents, if your children are not your priority, and believe me, guilty. When I was in the military, we used to say it was God, family, and then country, which was your job. Yeah. Dude, that was a lie. It was your job. My job came before my family. My job came before my God. Like that's the truth. And that's a hard truth that you have to live with. And you have to recognize that. And if you're a person who's saying, my job comes before my family, at least you're living in truth. But I also like to fall back on the fact that I felt like I was doing something selfless and God was calling me to do,
Yep.
So, dude,
but Jeff, I
I
think
just,
most men probably say, well, I'm doing what God, I'm being, I had Bruce Dill on a couple of weeks ago, and he said, we are protectors, providers, and priests.
yep.
That's what we're called to be. And, we said, so a lot of us put down protector, provider before we put down priest. And so we said, well, I'm providing. It's what God told me. I've got to provide. If I don't go to work, we don't, and I think so many men forget the priest part. Forget that you're responsible for the men that you produce, or the children that you put into this world, and the wife that you gave a vow to. You're responsible for them in more ways than just two. And I think a lot of guys will put hobbies in front of our kid. They'll go out and they'll work. If they don't put their job first, they put their own selfish desires. I know plenty of guys who when hunting season opens, they're gone from their whole family. They're gone for months,
Yeah.
and they don't, maybe they take their kids, maybe they don't. If they have girls, they probably don't, but they just leave their wife. And that's the most important thing. And I just shake my head going, like, you know what? You're sacrificing your family for what you want. And that is the biggest, I think, sin that most men can do, is just sacrificing your family for your own selfish desires. And I see it all the time. And it bothers me.
I agree. And I want to exhort the men that listen to this to just have an honest discussion with yourself and with the Holy Spirit. And even with what you said protector, provider, priest, but what I heard immediately was you're stepping right over protector to provider. That's what I'm saying. Like this dad that I'm talking to, who's about to lose his daughter potentially forever.
Mm-hmm.
He's thinking he's a provider, but what about the protector? The protector comes first, doesn't it? Because what does provider mean? How many boats do you need? How many homes do you need? How, you know what I mean? How many hot tubs do you need? Like, what, if you're stepping over protector to be that provider, you're doing something wrong. And then to me, it's almost that order, right? Protector, provider, and then priest. And many guys, like you said, they stop at provider. There's a lot of good men out there. Again, guys, there are incredible men out there being protectors. There are incredible men out there providers, and there are incredible men out there being priests. But we're not here to pat ourselves on the back. We're here to reach across the aisle to the men that are failing in one of those three P's.
Yeah, I agree. And, I didn't serve in the military, and I don't make apologies for that. I just took a different
Certainly.
path. But I look up to you guys who sacrificed a good portion of your life and a good portion of your family time and things, especially, during the global war on terrorism. There was just so much out there, so much to do, and so many places we were going, and now we wonder, what the whole purpose was. I know a lot of guys are just like wondering why they sacrificed whenever we just gave it all back. And a lot of us wonder the same thing. I see guys that, gave limbs and gave, eyes and gave their lives for something that we then just gave back and gave up all the ground we captured. So I just, I want to thank you for your service, number one, and just, tell all the guys out there that are struggling. I know you're involved with, I'm gonna get the name wrong. I had it written down. The other one that you're involved of. Oh shoot.
The nonprofit now?
Yeah, the other not Skull Games, but the other one that you're involved in. Oh shoot, I don't remember.
Yeah,
I'm gonna mess it up. Anyway, so it's all about helping those who are coming out of military service to reconnect and to get back involved. I don't know. Anyway.
Oh, the soft missions one with Damon?
Yes. No.
Okay. No.
Anyway.
Well, David, what you said was loaded, and I appreciate that. One of the things that crushes me, especially when I meet a young guy who says, I was in the military, but I only did, I was only a mechanic, or I was only an infantryman. It's like, oh my gosh, like even that is like the comparing yourself. Yes, I got to the highest levels of the military by the grace of God, and I felt called to do it, and continually called. But even this discussion, it's kind of loaded, and we'll talk about this more, but that's kind of what my book became, was me dealing with this stuff, because yes, there was a sacrifice to it. There was a selflessness to it, but
Yeah.
there was also a personal drive and ambition to get to the top, to become part of the most incredible fighting force that history has ever known. And warfare was exhilarating. I mean, that's
Oh,
I remember reading books when I was a kid of Vietnam veterans, especially the soft guys, the Mac VSOG guys, and they'd go back to Vietnam and they'd go back to Vietnam. And I was always like, what kind of man returns to war 3, 4, 5 years in a row? And then I tasted war and it was like, oh, I see. So
yeah.
even as we talk about this, I appreciate it, but there's also a guilt there that I did sacrifice my family. Yes, there were higher ideals, but there was so much excitement and there was so much exhilaration of living on the edge in this time of war, that there's a little bit of coming to terms with that, But I
Yeah.
also, what I want to relate to your audience, to our audience, is I was constantly in discussion with God. I'm not saying when I was necessarily a young man, by the time I was a captain, so I'm probably close to 30 by the time I'm a captain. That was when I matured to this point where I really went to God with all of my questions and looking for His guidance, and I felt very strongly that God continued to drive me into that space, and I felt with God, I said, hey, I feel like you're calling me to this. I am prepared to give my life for this, but here's what I ask. Allow me to survive. Take a limb, take one of each. You can have one. You take an arm, take a leg. You know what I mean? Leave this middle section. You know what I mean? That I don't use enough because I'm deployed too often. And don't take both legs. Don't take both arms. That's too hard. Take one of each. I don't care. But let me live and build this relationship with my wife and sons on the back end. And
Amen.
it's kind of, again, you were talking about covenant. That was the covenant that I signed with God. I will go to war and I will fight to the best of my ability to represent you and to represent freedom and our ideals. But let me live to enjoy and reorient myself with my family. And I've had 10 years of that now. So it's also
Oh,
not lost on me, Dave, that contract has run out, right? Like if God took me today, I can't complain.
yep.
I gave him, again, it was about 10 years of kind of that constant fighting, from 2001 until when I got out in 2015. And he's given me 10 years of peace and tranquility and time with my sons as young men. Um, and what I like about getting older too, I don't know how old you are, but you've got the gray beard, so I can assume some things. It's just a different level of ambition. Like we're trying to give back now. I've done what I was called to do as a young man and even as a middle-aged man. And now as I'm an older man, it's building that legacy. It's building that opportunity. It's breathing into this next generation of men and women to really carry on behind us. And I find that really exciting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of kids look up to a guy like you who, was a man's man who went out and took the fight to the enemy and all those. And there's a lot of guys who have turned that into, ministries like you have. And I thank them for that. I thank them for bringing that back home. And, one of the things I told you I really wanted to talk about was, you wrote a book, Where Have All the Heroes Gone? And it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was kind of a walk through biblical heroes and what they did and everything else. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about is, heroism isn't reserved for extraordinary men, right? Everybody can be a hero, and every man has that in, every woman has that in them. It's just ordinary people, just accepting what God has called them to do and doing it to the best of their ability. So if I had to ask you, what is a hero? What would be your response to that question?
I think a hero is somebody who is faithful to their calling and understands and recognizes what that calling is. So there's that first part. What am I called to do? you are faithful to it, and then you're doing it not only to the best of your ability, but within constant dialogue and guidance from our Creator. So the little bit that we talked, did I hear you correctly? You own a plumbing company.
Yep.
So a hero to me is that plumber who wakes up in the morning. He knows what his duties are that day. He does them to the best of his ability with integrity. Again, we talked about that before we got online. Not lying or cheating or upselling or doing crappy work. Like you can look at his plumbing and go, that man has a sense of pride in himself. Yeah, but you know what? He also has a sense of pride of who he is as a son of the king, you know?
Amen.
And then he comes home and he does the best that he can with his wife and his children. And he gets up the next morning and he brushes his teeth and he looks himself in the mirror. To me, that's the hero. This morning, Dave, I got up and my boys, our older boy, Aaron, he's living with us now. He just went through some heartache. He had a fiance of many years who they just broke up. So he's back home in the house, and he is a professional jiu-jitsu athlete. That's what he does. So I got up, 7:00. I go downstairs. I'm having my first little cup of coffee. You know where my boy is? He's in the cold plunge. He's in the cold plunge in water that's like 35 degrees or whatever, somewhere between 35 and 40 degrees. And he's preparing his body. He's shocking his body into being awake. And then he heads out to do his first workout of the day, you know, and nobody told him to get up. Nobody told him to get in that cold plunge, you know, and I'll see him again at jiu-jitsu at 11, where he'll be training. He'll be training as just in the class, and then he'll teach 2 classes this evening to children. He'll do a bunch of privates. Again, like I look at my son and what he does on a daily basis is heroic because he understands who he is, what God is asking him to do and expecting him to do. And he's quietly going about his business. And that is the answer to that question. Where have all the heroes gone? They're right here. They're right here amongst us. The men that you're working with, the men that we rub shoulders with, they're not the ones who have the million followers. They're not the ones who are on social media beating their chest. You know, they're not necessarily throwing a pigskin far or slamming a basketball. You know what I mean? Like they're the men that make this country move. Yep. I just got, the thing I love about podcasts is you can kind of wander, right? So my son just introduced me to this, musician named Steven Wilson Jr. Have you heard of this guy yet?
No.
Steven Wilson Jr. Holy crap. Check this guy out. Between his voice, the way he plays and tunes his guitars, and then the lyrics, it's he's one in a million. And he's one of these guys who was a quiet singer-songwriter in Nashville for many, many years. People knew him. He's got a bunch of hits that he wrote. And then his father, on his deathbed said, Steven, you're so talented. You have such an incredible voice. You have such an ability behind the microphone. Why don't you get on the stage and perform? And it was one of the last things his dad said to him, and it motivated him. And he did. He came out on stage and he performed. And it is mind-boggling, this talent. So here's this guy, I think he's in his 40s now, who just quietly went about his business. And now he's a superstar. And he has this song called Gary. And it came out, I think, last year. But Gary is the guy who has his name Gary on his shirt, right? Like, is he a plumber? Is he a mechanic? Whatever he is, but he has his name Gary. And he's basically saying, what happened to Gary? Where are all the Garys? You know what I mean? We used to look at Gary as that hero, that man who got up every day, like my dad, who he was a tree trimmer for the power company. And then he worked at a power plant. My dad got up at 4:30 in the morning every day, got in his car, went to work, came home at 5 or 6 at night, and he did that for 30 years. And his name's Dennis. So Dennis and Gary, like, what happened to Dennis and Gary? What happened to us looking at these men and going, thank God we have faithful men who are protectors and providers and priests.
Amen.
So check out that song, Gary.
I will.
Because it's exactly what we're talking about.
You talk about the guy getting up, doing it honestly, not going in and padding the work. Because in our business, in the plumbing industry, I see so many big companies come in that are buying up these smaller guys, and they'll come in and then they put in they put in higher rates. They put in, and it got to where they were charging $4,000 for a water heater. And I'm like, there's no reason why anyone should pay $4,000 to put in a water heater. And I just, I can't compete with their advertising. I can't compete with all that. So we just started doing mostly commercial, because I can, through word of mouth and through the great work we do, we keep those customers, because I wasn't going to compete with throwing money at, and I wasn't going to charge what they're charging. I'm not going to go charge, $2,700, more than enough for a water heater with everything you run into. And I just couldn't see. And I've lost plumbers to go to those other companies that charge so they can make more money. And okay, so I don't want you. If you're gonna be able to look someone in the eye and tell them that they got to pay $4,000 for a $2,700 product, okay, I don't want you. I don't want you. We've made sacrifices, and we've done the same thing. We've said we're not going to do it. And has it hurt? Of course it has, a little bit at different times, but you know what? I can go to sleep at night, and I can wake up in the morning and be completely happy with what I did, and I don't have to worry about repercussions or anything else. So,
Well, Jesus said, pick up your cross and follow me, right?
Yeah.
And we all know that, and we say that, but that's the minimum cross, is be honest and have integrity. So even in your particular line of work, where it has set you back, or it's cut some of your profit margins, how big is that cross? You know what I mean? Like you got this, it's this big, like that's what I talk about with people. Like how much do you need? Like if your sacrifice to be integrous takes you from a $1.3 million house to a $1.5 million house, like what are we even talking about? That cross is tiny. Are you men that are out there? What is the cross that you're carrying, and how big is it? And when Jesus asked you to pick up your cross and follow him, what's your cross? I'm in the same space as a nonprofit. It boggled my mind how many nonprofits exaggerate and just straight out lie about who they are and what it is they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's my cross. Speak honestly, let your work speak for itself. And we're lagging behind some of these big names. But again, what's that cross is about that big. I can carry about 50 of those.
Yeah. It's, you got to answer for it. You've got to answer for what you did with what God gave you. It's just like when God gave the talents to the guys and went away, the landowner, and he said, he comes back, and one guy says, hey, I took your talents you gave me, I doubled it. Another guy, he say, I got 50% return. The other guy said, hey, I buried it in the backyard so I wouldn't lose it. These people are taking what God gave them, and they're perverting it, and they're turning it into something that he didn't intend. And the work that they're doing is they're burying it in the backyard. They may have a lot more of it, but they're just burying them, and they're not really using them what he gave them to the bank. So we talked about, what a hero is, and that's that guy going out. And, we talk about, you falter, you fail sometimes because you did the right thing. It cost you. How should betrayal and suffering and loss shape us as men? I mean, how should we face all those things when they come, and that character does cost us? It does get expensive. I mean, we look at God and say, I did what you told me to do, and now look at where I am. I mean, so how should we look at that? I mean, because pressure does expose who we are. And if we stand up, it does get expensive sometimes. So what should we do with that? I mean, as men?
Well, Dave, let me start with what Jesus says.
Great place to start.
And what Paul says. And he says, rejoice in the betrayal, rejoice in the suffering.
Amen.
I can't really do that. I try. So let's just start that. Like, that's the ideal, right? Like that's the standard is God tells us, rejoice in the fact that you are being held back because of your faith. Because you follow me, people will betray you. They will hate you. They will spit on you. Rejoice in that. So that's the standard that I aspire to. I can't aspire. I can't live that. I can have my moments, where I can live in that space. But by and large, this goes back to what you talked about earlier in the military, and how a lot of people are hurting. We've lost the wars that we committed to. And I have those moments where I am disappointed, but I arrived many, many years ago that the fight is worth it, So even as a fighter, as a jiu-jitsu athlete, I love the fight. I don't win very often. I lose most of the time. Just like in this counter-trafficking space, we lose way more than we win. In the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, we won the battles, but we lost those wars. But are you enjoying the fight? Are you enjoying the labor to aspire to be the person that God has called you to be? That's it. Fighting is not about winning. Fighting is about fighting. Protecting people is about protecting people, and it's that level of sacrifice. So I have to remind myself this on a daily basis with what I do in the counter-trafficking space. Like I said, I head to jiu-jitsu here after this podcast where I am reminded, you don't do this because you win, because I get my butt kicked on a daily basis. Yeah. You do this because it's the struggle and the sacrifice. And even, when we talk about these heroes, I think of I talk about my son, Aaron. I'll talk about my son, Jonah now. He's 26. He just got his master's from Liberty University. He's going to be a teacher in Seattle. He's going to be a high school teacher in Seattle. And this is one of those things. And he has this beautiful 12 to 14 bullets that he's recognized. He really wants to go in there and shape the lives of these young people, and I tell my boys, and I tell people often that saying of, preach the gospel everywhere you go, and when necessary, use your voice. Amen. You've heard that before. And that's the heroic piece of that is my son is about to embark this, very soon, stepping into the public school system where he is going to mirror his faith principles, his trust in Yeshua. And he's going to do that all with this inspiration and aspiration to reach that next group of people.
In a very inhospitable place too.
Yeah. And once again, what breaks his heart is he has these kids a few hours a day, but what he's dealing with goes all the way back to the start. Parents that don't care enough. Yep. So he's trying to be that substitute. It's a fascinating space. Again, that's why I could talk about my sons all day, because they are my heroes. Again, I'm the awesome. You look at my uniform, I have a heroic military uniform. It's just littered with medals, but what is behind all of that is just a quiet man who was driven by his calling. That's what all of that really means.
Yeah. So you mentioned your uniform, and you went out as a lieutenant colonel, I believe.
Yes. Yep.
And so let me ask you a question. The guy who's sitting there going like, yeah, but I don't have any power. I don't have a position. How am I going to be a leader? How am I going to be, what God wants me to be if I don't have rank? So does rank equal leadership?
No. And in fact, in special operations, rank is irrelevant. So in the Rangers, because you come in, when you come into the military, you can come straight into the Ranger regiment, right? So you're a private, and you're a specialist, and a corporal, and so there's a rank structure, and you wear that rank structure on your collar. When you go into special forces, or when you go into Delta Force, you don't wear rank anymore. People don't really know what your rank is, and even when you are, nobody calls me sir. Nobody called me Colonel Tiegs. It was Jeff, or it was boss. That's what we used at the unit, was people would call you boss. So of course that's a sense of leadership, right? Like, people probably call you boss, you know what I mean? Like, cause you're the boss, but you're not Colonel Dave Johnson, so even in these high level special operations units, rank is irrelevant. And I used to, when I would have my in briefings, I had the same in brief when I was a lieutenant as I had when I was a lieutenant colonel. And it's this pyramid, right? And at the very, very tippy top of that pyramid is my rank. Like when we discuss something and I ask you to do something, it's because we all understand and recognize what the mission and vision is. We understand what the intent is. We understand what your role and responsibility is and what my role and responsibility is. And the time when it comes all the way to that tippy top where it is, do it because I told you. You know what I mean? Like all of that other stuff has failed. I cannot remember a single time in my special operations career where I told somebody, do it because I told you, do it because I'm the highest ranking dude in the room. Like that's never the point. Same with being a dad. If you're having to say, do this because I told you to, do this because I'm your dad, you're failing your little private soldier in helping him understand and recognize what's the mission, what's the vision, and what's the intent. So I have purposefully sought out these units where rank didn't matter. The small unit tactics. Again, I was an NCO in the Rangers. I was a made man in the Ranger Battalion. I was an officer in the Ranger Battalion. I was a made man in the Ranger Battalion. I did not want to continue in that structure where it was that hierarchy. I wanted to take my rank off. I had a specific duty and responsibility. My counterpart that was an NCO had a specific duty and responsibility. And then everyone in our team, in our detachment, in our squadron, they all had duties and responsibilities. And that's what was paramount. And that goes back to where I find myself a lot of times when we're talking to men, that word duty is sometimes overlooked. It's not overlooked in the military. And it's one of the things that I look at all the time. What is my duty? And quite often, duty isn't fun. We talk about a marriage. I said this earlier. Marriage has been the most difficult thing that I have ever done. And what is always in front of my face is, what is my duty? What is my duty as a husband? Things aren't going great. Things aren't this, again, like, we're not having enough sex. We're not having enough romantic time. All these kind of things that plague these relationships. I mean, always, right? Like that's God's trick on us. When we're teenagers, we all have the same kind of appetite for sex. You know what I mean? And then we continue on as men. And then the women, it kind of edges off with the women, and now you have this thing that every marriage goes through. It's like, well, what happened? You know what I mean? And it's God's way of telling us, hey, stop being so carnal. Start to look at some of these other aspects and relationships with this human that I put in your life when you were a teenager. You guys are now approaching 60. Is that all you can continue to think about? Is how much sex you have? You know what I mean? So there's all these things that as life ebbs and flows, duty has been the thing that really is probably, duty and faithfulness are probably the two words that have been paramount in front of my eyes.
Yeah. So, in the military, your place of work is the battlefield. It's pretty much, but every man has a battlefield, right? Every man has a battlefield that he has to go to every day, whatever God's called him to do. So that's his battlefield. So with mine, it's leading young men, in the service industry. It's going up against customers and doing the right thing, and it's doing what we're called to do. And, that's my battlefield, and that's what God has called me to. I think if I look at my battlefield and what victory looks like, is turning out young men who do the right thing. Both of my boys work for me, and my daughter works for me.
I love that, Dave. I love that.
Yep. And I think that's why God put me where he put me. I didn't get here. This was not my plan. I was in corporate America. I was traveling globally. I was doing a lot of stuff. I was away from home a lot, and God squelched it. God stopped it. He, not by my choosing. I was having a ball, and he said, "Nope, I've got something better for you." And he put me in the battlefield where he wanted me. And I think I am right where I need to be, because I'm able to do this and a lot of other things. But the battlefield is where we need to, whatever God put us in, is where we need to make sure that we're winning. And,
Yeah.
and it's not going to be, it may not be glorious. It may not be, where you've got the medals on your chest when you're done, but it's where you've got the results are tangible, and that you can see these young men growing and doing the right things and becoming men of character. And that's what
Yeah.
I've enjoyed doing, is watching both of my boys take on and do stuff. And my daughter is, she's doing phenomenal. And it's just watching them all work within the business and doing the things and growing and getting better and better and learning, and watching them learn stuff is just great. So, but I think in your career and in your thing, that battlefield ends, right? You can't continue forever in that battlefield. So I know for a lot of people out of the military, they have a tough time with that transition, coming
Yeah.
out of that hyper, adrenaline filled job into, I mean, mundane. I mean, you're in traffic, you're battling traffic. You're no longer, doing things that spike the adrenaline. So, how did you deal with coming out and going into something completely different, and going into something that was, well, I guess you kind of went into a more adrenaline driven
Yeah.
career too,
Yeah.
but how did you segue into that? How do guys segue into that and change, their calling?
Well, I'm gonna back up a little bit too, where you talk about working with your boys. I work with my boys as often as I can. And I understand nepotism, right? Like if you're just handing your family stuff that they're not prepared for. But dude, like you said, my sons of 28 and 26, I have watched them for 28 years and 26 years go through the trials and tribulations with character and honesty and integrity. I know they will never lie. I know they will never cheat. So this idea of nepotism, but it's like, but I know these young men, you know, it kind of goes back to when I was in the military in special forces, especially in group, you've got first, third, fifth, seventh, 10th group, you've got these different groups. And when a commander would take over a group or even a higher level thing, like maybe they take over Joint Special Operations Command or something, it would always be it would be kind of this term. Oh, he's from fifth group. Now the fifth group mafia is in charge, or a guy from 10th group comes in and then he hires all these guys from 10th group, I mean, and like you would talk about it like it wasn't fair, like, oh, Dave's in charge now when he hired his kids and he hired all these other guys that he's worked with over the years, and it's one of those things that's nonsensical. It's like, if I'm in charge of a unit, a huge organization, I'm going to bring the men that I know. I'm going to bring the men that I fought with. I've stood with this guy in the battlefield. I've stood with this guy in the boardroom. You know what I mean? So I'm going to build my team of guys that I know and I've watched, versus in some name of equity, like I'm just going to bring some dude in that I've never met before. So even this idea of having my sons involved with the things that I do, I absolutely love it, because they are zero fail. I know they will never betray me. I know they will never let me down. And who else can you say? What other, even, you might have some men that you've worked with for 28 years by now, but how many men have you watched for 28 years consistently make faithful, God-driven choices? So that's my plug on nepotism. Look, you guys, I get it. Nepotism is a real thing and we should throw stones at it, but don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Because if you're not allowing your children to work with you because you're afraid from stigma about nepotism, I say beat it. You want to throw stones at me because I love working with my sons? Come meet my sons. Come walk a mile in our shoes and see who they are and what it is they do. And if you can find a better person to do what I'm asking them to do, then introduce me, because I'll take it. And now to get to your actual question, yes, that was my fear. So, every time I've done things through the military, even as a father, like, so I think what's beautiful about the Bible, it is so layered with lessons, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
there's the spiritual things that we're learning from, but then it's also a cautionary tale. It's why I talk about David, and I write about David, and I we can spend the next 2 hours talking about David. But when I look at David, who was a man after God's own heart, and he failed in the end, the Bathsheba incident, and
Yeah.
Saul, Peter denied Jesus. Solomon, the wisest man that ever walked the earth, got distracted. So when I read these stories, I put myself in those shoes. Who am I? Am I smarter than Solomon? Am I stronger than Samson? Like, this is a cautionary tale for us to not lose your way. And then I've seen the military guys again, not necessarily officers as much, but NCOs specifically, which is where I really was brought up as an NCO. They lose their way after the military, like you said. They take the uniform off and they don't know who they are anymore.
Yeah.
So I worked hard to understand and recognize who I am inside that uniform. It was never about the uniform. And interestingly, it goes back to very similarly to what you talked about. You said protector, provider, priest is what every man is called to do. If I had to reduce that to one, I would say protector, because provider and priest can come into that because you're protecting their spiritual faith. So I identified as a protector many, many years ago, and that was a necessity. When the wars became banal, I recognized we're not going to win these wars, like I talked about. Who am I? Am I a war fighter? Am I here to win wars? No, you're here to protect. You're here to protect the people of Iraq. You're here to protect the people of Afghanistan. You're here to protect the pick a country that I've worked in. You're here to protect your team, even in a place like Afghanistan. I'm here to protect those other Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine service members that are living on the ground. In the unit, we had everything at our disposal. We didn't have to drive around through IEDs. We flew. You know what I mean? Like we had everything that we needed. So towards the end of the wars, my job was not to really, my job was still to capture, kill Taliban and Al Qaeda. But the reason wasn't to win a war in Afghanistan. The reason was to protect those innocent people in Afghanistan who were trying to make something of their country, and to protect the men and women who our nation has asked to live in the dirt and try to make something of that country. So recognizing I was a protector, quite honestly, being afraid that I would lose my identity, I prayed to God to show me what he wanted me to do next. He called me into this space of sex trafficking, which was not something I understood. I began to study it, and I began to faithfully walk into this space. And it answered a lot of questions and concerns that I had. And one of them was building an organization where service members could exit. They're not putting themselves at high risk, but they're still able to be following in those footsteps of hunters and protectors. So it was a labor of love. It started back around God laid it on my heart in 2011. I started building it in 13, 14. By the time I retired in 2015, I had the concept. I had a few missteps. So I worked with some other organizations. I had some partners who, again, in my opinion, had some serious integrity issues that forced us to part our ways. You reminded me of this when you were talking earlier, where God called me to this many, many years ago, and he showed me a vision of what he expects and what he wants and what he will help build. But it has been one baby step at a time, one step forward, two steps back. This idea of, he showed me a vision that was bright in the future, but man, all he's been giving me over the last 10 years is just the candlelight before each step. So that's the other thing I want to talk to folks is, even though you might hear and feel what God has called you to do, I don't think it's going to be easy. Don't think that even necessarily you're going to accomplish that in your time. It may be the next generation or the generation after that. And once again, I fall back on my Bible. Dave, do you remember how long the Israelites were captive in Egypt before Moses showed up?
No.
400 years. So this is what I'm saying, people, when you, and I'm not perfect, right? Like I'm one of those guys now, like when I used to read in the Bible, like the guy who shakes his fist at God, he's like, what are you doing? I always felt like, dude, who do you think you are? You're shaking your fist at the Almighty. But I've become in such a close relationship with God. It's almost embarrassing where like there are times where I feel like, I'm in the same room with him and I'm going, what are you doing? You said you would do this and you're not even helping,
Yep.
But then I fall back on 400 years the Israelites were slaves in Egypt.
Waiting.
Like that's unfathomable for us. Our country just turned 250, so for 400 years, and then Moses shows up and it's just miracle after miracle and devastation and the power of God. And he parts the Red Sea and the Egyptians follow and they get swallowed up and they're on their way to the promised land. And then they wander in the desert for 40 years. They wander in the desert. So this is what I have to what I'm telling people on this podcast is what I'm telling myself on a daily, regular basis. Who am I to cry and moan about how slow this is happening? And God, you told me it was going to be this way and you wanted me to do this. 40 years. Every single one of those adults died in the desert. Moses died. Got to Mount Nebo where I stood. I stood at Mount Nebo and overlooked the promised land. And that was as far as Moses got. And then, Dave, at the end of the Old Covenant, how many years took place between the last book of the Bible to the opening verses of the gospel and Jesus appears on scene?
It's 400 years again.
Again, 400 years, God did not speak
didn't say
to his people. He did not say a word. He was quiet for 400 years. And then John the Baptist comes on the scene and says, wake up, people, because the silence is over and here comes the Messiah.
So let me ask you a question. What was the last thing God said?
God through Jesus?
No. The last thing God said before he was quiet for 400 years.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. Is this in Malachi or?
Yeah, it's in Malachi. So he told the fathers, he spoke directly to fathers. Directly to fathers was the last thing he said.
What was it?
No, so he said I'm going to mess it up, about turning your heart back to, fathers will turn their hearts back to God. He talked about fatherhood and how to, and all that. I'll look it up.
Okay. No, I love this. This is why I love these types of discussions. Cause you've read my first book, I call them Easter eggs. I call them the words between the lines. I love what God has laid out for us if you seek him. So I will definitely look into that, Dave. That's
I got it
terrific. Yeah.
All right. And so the last thing he said was, and he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse. So the last thing he did was turn your hearts to your children. What we've been talking about this whole conversation.
And then, so again, if you read between the lines, what did he warn? Or I will
come and strike your land.
Yep. So I'm sorry. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. Guess what didn't happen? The fathers didn't turn to their children. Their children didn't turn to their fathers. And there was a curse. And Israel was overtaken by foreign armies. And God gave them ample time. He gave them 400 years to turn their face towards him.
Yeah. You look at the little Easter eggs, as you called them. For Moses, you talk about Moses. Moses was in the wilderness for 40 years, but before that, God trained Moses for 40 years in the temple.
For 40 years.
Right? I mean, in the palace for 40 years. And then he was in exile in the wilderness for 40 years because he killed the guy. So for 80 years, God trained up Moses in the palace where he would have to work and in the wilderness where he would have to work. So for 80 years, he prepared Moses for the job, and for 40 years each. So God prepares us in so many ways. And then if you look at redemption, Peter denied Christ 3 times around a charcoal fire. And then when Jesus came back, was resurrected, he came back, he met the disciples at the seashore. He called them up and said, hey, they did the miracle with the fishes again. Where the fish? And he called Peter back up to a charcoal fire again. The only 2 places it was mentioned in the Bible. And he says, do you love me, Peter? And Peter says, yeah. He said, feed my sheep. So 3 denials, 3 times he asked him, do you love me? It was a complete redemption story for Peter. He brought him back. He said, feed my sheep. And then God built the church on Peter. So God, doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what you've failed at. It doesn't matter anything. God still has a purpose, and that purpose still lies there. We just have to be humble and open and awake to see what he's got for us. And every man on this call, every man on this watching this podcast has a call. Every woman on this watching has a call from God to do something. It may be as mundane as being the best mother or father you can be and being Gary with it on your shirt and doing great work every day. But God has got a purpose for your life, and he's calling you to do that. And it's just, there's so many things in the Bible. Just get in the Bible, man. Just get and read God's word. There's so much there if you'll just slow down and read it and meditate on it.
Beautiful, dude. And you've given me some stuff to research and dig into, and especially even with the Moses one. So what I'm working on now, I'm working on a series of 4 books. So where this came from, man, if I had the time, I would learn Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic, you know what I mean? But in this modern era, you just can lean on so much, right? Like for me to sit there and memorize and spend all that time. So I've really, even with Heroes, but before Heroes book, my wife and I, she comes from a Jewish, ethnicity. They were secular Jews, but again, that's that really fascinating group of people. Like the Jewish people are a people group. It's a religion. It's a nation. Like it's a very, very fascinating thing. But what I was called years ago to really look at the Jewishness of Jesus. It's why I like to call him Yeshua. You know, Jesus is the Greek, you know, but his Hebrew name was Yeshua. And even the name alone carries a deep meaning, the one who saves, right? So I really started looking at the Jewishness of Jesus, which I want to challenge everybody. If you don't understand Judaism, you don't understand Christianity, you do not understand what was at the heart of Jesus. Jesus was a Jew, and he followed the Jewish laws, and he fulfilled all the Jewish laws, and he took things like the mikvah ritual washing, and he turned it into baptism, and he took the Passover meal and he turned it into a sacrament for all of us. You know what I mean? Like if you don't really understand where Jesus came from and what his bedrock faith was, you're missing a lot. So it really started that journey in understanding the Jewishness of Jesus, and there's some really good books out there that talk about that. And then we were able to put that into hyperdrive when we lived in Israel. So I spent probably a total of about 2 years living in Israel in my military time. One was very specifically a year and a half with my family. Right before I retired, we lived right in Jerusalem. So we had the luxury of going to these places. Like you're talking, like again, I've stood at Mount Nebo, you know, where Peter denied Jesus. It's there. Like there's no question on where it is, where Jesus was crucified and buried. There's no question where that happened. Have you been to Israel yet, Dave?
No, I have not.
Yeah, there's an old monk, Basil Pixner, he used to say, visiting the Holy Land is like having access to a 5th gospel. And it really is. It unlocks the other 4 gospels and even more than that. So I definitely want to encourage anybody and everybody to go to Israel and see, because you walk this land, you know, again, you can walk from Mount Nebo down, cross the Jordan and see Jericho, you know. So there's just, we could talk about that all day, where all of these pieces and all of these things happen. But even where you're saying where Jesus cooked those fishes after his resurrection is the same place where he fed the 5,000. He fed the 5,000 in two different places. One was on one side of the Sea of Galilee. The other one was on the other. So again, like you were tying all these things together. Even that idea where these, the boys, the disciples, they don't know what to do. Like, what do we do now? And what do they fall back on? They fall back on their previous calling. They fall back onto their identity. We're fishermen. Let's go back up to the the sea and we'll fish. So as they're coming in, they see a man in the distance cooking a little fire. And of course, in the boat, they're saying to themselves, oh, look, that there's a dude building a little fire at that exact same place that Jesus multiplied the fishes and the loaves. How interesting is that? And then they get a little closer and they get a little closer and they see, oh my goodness, it's him. It's Yeshua, and all of these things that you said, plus he's communicating to them without saying a word. You watched me feed the 5,000. I have gone to the depths of hell. I am here on this earth and I'm about to ascend into heaven. It's your job now. It's your job to multiply the loaves and the fishes. And when I said you are fishers of men, I really meant you're fishers of men. What in the heck are you doing out there on the water catching fish? This is not your calling. And then he had some healing to do with Peter, So, Dave, men who are bored with the Bible just aren't digging into it enough. It is, I don't care what you like. One of my sons loves Dune. One of them loves the book Lord of the Rings. Like I don't like the Star Wars trilogy. I don't care what you are into as an adult. The reason you love these stories is because it's the human story. And it's usually a man on a heroic journey who has to find his calling and he has to sacrifice some things. And then, a guy like C.S. Lewis and a guy like, who wrote Lord of the Rings? His name's escaping me. Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien. These men understood and recognized the universal truths of the story of man. And all of those are allegories for the journey that's expected of us, the story of Jesus. So, man, if you aren't recognizing and understanding the Bible as being an adventure story for you to follow, pray to God for him to show you it in that light. And that's been my pursuit. Oh, dude, I lost track. Let me pause there for any questions, because then I'll get back on track with where this book series came from.
Yeah. No, so you talk about Israel, and I was in Jordan, and I got to and the guy we were there visiting, it was business, and he took us out to where the Jordanians say that Jesus was baptized. We got to go see where the little part where he was supposedly baptized. And a funny thing, you'll like this, is the guy we were with was Muslim. He was taking us to a Christian site, and he and I walked up, and we could look across the Jordan at Israel and see the Christians being baptized in the Jordan. They were coming out white robes down this big, they had this big production over there, and we were watching them be baptized, and he was just standing there, and I just looked at him, and his tears in his eyes. He says, "We're all the same. We all look the same." And he said, he just shook his head. I said, "You've never been here?" He said, "I've never been here before." He said, I'm glad you guys came so I could come out and see this." He said, "We're all the same." And, but looking across, seeing Jews and seeing Christians across the thing, a Muslim, so that was kind of interesting. But getting to see where Jesus was supposedly baptized. I know there's probably 5 different sites for Jesus.
Nope, Dave, that's it. That's it. So this is one of those things.
I got chills and my goosebumps when I was there. It was just amazing to see that area.
Yeah. So here's what I believe, and there are plenty. I relish in the fact that I'm just a layman, right? I'm just a pilgrim. I'm just a journeyman. These are my ideas. They're not. The ideas are reinforced by research. They're reinforced by prayer and meditation, and I will challenge anybody. So, Dave, you were at the spot. You were at the spot where Jesus was baptized. Now, you weren't at the exact spot. You were about 300 meters away. Okay. And why I say that is, I believe it's on the Israel side, but it really is kind of in that DMZ zone still. It's kind of in where there are the mines.
Yeah.
There is a first century church that had the largest baptismal font that has ever known. There's archaeological findings of a church that was built on that site. So this is one of those things, again, you're talking first century. So you're talking within a few decades, no more than 100 years after Jesus was left the earth, that they venerated that spot. So it's pretty hard to build a stone church, right? So there is literally a place that we can speak with a high level of certainty that it's the exact place Jesus was baptized, because they built a monument over it, and you would have had eyewitness people that guided that space, you know?
Yeah.
I say this with people. You ever been to Boston and seen Paul Revere's house?
I've been to Boston. I've never seen Paul Revere's house.
Okay. On the Freedom Trail, when you walk through Boston, you go right past Paul Revere's house. And I don't think anyone on this planet goes, was that really Paul Revere's house? I mean, that was in 1775. I mean, was that really Paul Revere's house? It's like, yes, we venerated that location 300 years ago. It's where Paul Revere lived, you know, and that's what happens in Israel. There's a lot of these places. It's like, yes, this is the place. And the reason you know it's the place is because if it's anchored in first century archaeology, nobody's going to build a monument over hypothesis, you know?
Yeah. So
there is archaeological evidence, and I'm glad you actually brought this up, because I'm always trying to weigh out what it is I'm going to talk about. There were this site where Jesus was baptized was one of the first kind of supernatural experiences I had with God, where I was asking him, because the more famous place that Christians like to go to is up in Yardenit, and it's just south of the Sea of Galilee, where the Jordan comes out. It's this beautiful site, and it's what you would want it to look like. You know what I mean? Like the 5 people in white robes being baptized in that muddy, dirty water that you saw. Dude, up in Yardenit, there's 100 people, and there's a beautiful building, and they dye the river blue in that space, and it's just beautiful. But there's not a snowball's chance in hell that's where Jesus was baptized. Like, you got to do some serious gymnastics to make the story fit that he was baptized way up there. But what ended up happening is that location that you went to, that was in the demilitarized zone for many years. You could not go there. You couldn't get there from Jordan, and you couldn't get there from Israel. So in the name of tourism, they created some alternate spaces. So archaeology, number 1. Number 2, where you stood, Dave, 2 miraculous things happened prior to that. So we talked about Moses. When Moses handed off the mantle of responsibility to Joshua, and Joshua was to lead Israel into the Holy Land, he got to the Jordan River, the priests touched the water piled up, and they walked across the Jordan. And then what happened? They built a monument. They built a 12-stone monument, and they sacrificed to God. And that was a tourist spot. That was a tourist spot for thousands of years. Thousands of years. The Israelites, the Jews, the Hebrews, they would go to that spot and commemorate this miraculous thing. So that was a huge tourist location. The other thing that happened there was when Elijah handed off his mantle of responsibility as a prophet to Elisha, he's taken up into the fiery chariot. Elisha takes Elijah's cloak and he touches the water, and the water separates, and Elisha walks across the Jordan, and he begins his journey as a prophet. So when I was praying to God and saying, can you show me what happened here? Can you show me where Jesus was baptized? And this may be a little bit weird for people. Those of you that have this level of a relationship with God, it's not weird. It's I think it's available for everybody. But he showed me this image of Moses and Joshua. He showed me this image of Elijah and Elisha. And then he showed me this image of John handing over to Jesus. So in the midst of Jesus' baptism, again, the Jewish scholars of the day, to include just the layman, they would have seen this as the third miraculous thing that happened at this very spot. God picks places on earth that he does things repeatedly because he wants you to tie them together. So Jesus is the third. Again, people that study numerology, it's the number of completeness. It's the number of holiness. So Jesus picked up the responsibility of John. So Jesus was baptized in that river. He exited that river as the warrior king Joshua. He exited that river as the priest and prophet of Elisha. And it was this completion. And this would not have been lost on the people of that day. It's lost on us. So Dave, not only did you see where Jesus was baptized, you saw where these other two monumental events happened, where God parted time and space and stepped onto this earth and did something miraculous.
That's awesome. Didn't know that. But yeah, so I wanted to make sure I put my hand in the Jordan. So I went down and, scooped up water and just really enjoyed that space. But yeah, it was a very, very reverent time for me. And I felt like, even if it wasn't there, I felt closer to my faith, felt closer to God. It was just a miraculous. And I just paused and just prayed, said, God, thank you for letting me come here, because it was a business trip, and otherwise I'd have probably never. We want to get to Israel. We really do. I want to go to Rome as well, see where Paul was.
Oh, yeah.
And see a lot of those things too. But yeah, that's some of the things we want to do. So, man, we haven't even touched on the Skull games yet. So, we need to segue a little bit, but now, so just, I guess, anything else you want to touch on what we were talking about before we kind of segue?
Yeah, this will probably be a good 10 minutes. But so where I was getting at with all of that is as I'm studying the Jewishness of Jesus, as I'm studying the Hebrew words behind everything, something caught my eye a couple years ago, and it was this thought idea that when we say the 10 commandments, it really shouldn't be translated as commandments. Everywhere else that Hebrew is translated as words or utterances of God. So this began this thought experiment of mine, which is, what if we don't call the 10 commandments the 10 commandments, we call them the 10 words, right? Well, what that immediately does is it forces you to take the 10 commandments and reduce them to a word, right? So where I will be brazen with folks, again, I don't have to worry about losing a congregation. The 10 commandments are dumb. The 10 commandments are dumb. And if you don't think they're dumb, then think about it for a minute, because you haven't thought about the 10 commandments. And here's what I mean by saying they're dumb. Some people might have turned this off already. They don't apply to us today in the level that they should. Okay? So there's a number of things that we deal with. Those laws, the stories in the Old Testament were very specific to the Hebrew people. You know what I mean? They, and we pick and choose, right? Even Jesus made it clear, between Peter and Paul as they were butting heads about what, when you're a follower of Yeshua, what Jewish laws do we have to follow? Like so we've always picked and chosen what we do and what we don't follow, right? But if you have to jump through hoops to make the 10 words, the 10 commandments fit your modern world, we're missing something, okay? Like, for example, number 1, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Please apply that to the modern world. And I went through grade school and high school, and I've been studying the Bible, and I've had thoughtful teachers tell me, well, what that means, Jeff, is you are having other gods before God. Like we talked about, your job is a god. Your own self-pursuit is a god. Is it though? Or is God telling Israel, of all the nations on the planet, I am choosing you, and you and I will be one. And all of these other small g gods that are out there that people are praying to, those are not yours. And then he follows it up with, don't make any idols. Dave, have you crafted an idol lately? Have you made a little monument and hung it on your wall and prayed to it? No.
Yeah.
But in the modern day, we're told, well, you've created idols. Your two plumbing companies are your idols. Your fantasy football team is an idol. Look, man, God isn't that ridiculous. He is saying something very, very specific. What I would also say, because I'm really stuck on this idea of God as a father, right? If you had to write down 10 words for your children that you wanted those words to guide their lives, okay? Would one of them be don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't covet? Would those be things that you would engrave in stone and hang on your child's wall? I think the answer to that is no. So my challenge is, and this is just a thought experiment. People can have other ideas, and I'm being somewhat confrontational by saying the 10 Commandments are dumb. They're dumb by the way we've applied them. They're dumb by the way we've interpreted them, and we've used them as a stick. You've done X, Y, or Z. Boom! It's a checklist. No, it is very, very practical commentary for the Hebrews of the day. It's not something worthy of hanging on the wall that your father would do. So if you were going to, let's just pick three. If you were going to make a stone plaque for your children and you wanted it to hang it on the mantle over their fireplace, what would be the top 3 words you would want to communicate to them? I'm putting you on the spot.
Faith, love, and hope would be 3 things.
Faith, love, and hope. Terrific. Which pretty much echoes Jesus, right? Pretty much echoes Jesus. And when Jesus was confronted with what is the most important commandment, he said, it's not about the commandments. It's about love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. So even Jesus is saying, stop looking at these 10 commandments as something you can accomplish, because that's what these people are saying, right? Like, if you haven't lied, I have not successfully completed all the 10 commandments. I have broken all of them, but there are people out there who have never done, by paper, they have completed the 10 commandments. Yeah. And that's what was happening with Jesus. I've kept all the commandments. Now what? And Jesus says, this is the higher standard. So those 10 commandments are pointing to faith, love, and hope. That's what they're pointing to. But we've misinterpreted all of them. And one of the things that I would challenge, and this is kind of where I'm exploring over time, is if those were 10 words and the top 3 were faith, love, and hope, and the Israelites of the day say, Moses, I see the first word is faith. I see the second word is love. I see the third word is hope. What do you mean by that? And he expands on what he means by those simple words. And it's part of what we've captured in the Old Testament. So that's the study that I've been looking at. Is it's harder than the 10 Commandments. It's way harder. Even if you've never broken any of those 10 commandments, have you been faithful purely? Have you loved purely? Have you continued to maintain hope? No, none of us have. So on one hand, I'm saying on one side of my mouth, stop using the 10 commandments to beat people up, because it's way harder than that.
Yeah.
You cannot fulfill the 10 commandments. Right. Stop using the 10 commandments as a litmus test for your purity, because you are impure. So let me wrap this up real quick. So in that pursuit of looking at those 10 words, obviously I'm directed towards the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus spends a whole lot of time going, okay, guys, you know the law up one side and down the other, but you're missing the forest for the trees. I did not come here to abolish the law. I came here to fulfill the law, cross every T and dot every I, but I'm living it in a space that faith, love, and hope are the priority. Yeah. So it pointed me towards that, and then it started to point me towards creation. Are there 10 words that God has been speaking to us from the point of creation all the way to the point of when he comes again to create the new Jerusalem? And my hypothesis is he's been telling us the same 10 things from creation through Sinai, through the Sermon on the Mount, all the way to the end times of this first creation. And that's what I'm exploring. So I stopped what I was doing in the 10 words, 10 commandments on Sinai. And I'm finishing up a book now on those same 10 words applied to the 7 days of creation and what God has been speaking to us, both very pragmatically and practically in black and white, as well as in between the lines. And that's been my journey, and it'll continue to be my journey for the next few years.
Yeah. I think you have a great point that Jesus boiled down the 10 Commandments into 2, right? And if you look at the 10 Commandments, the first 5 were about loving your man, and it's about loving God, And so if you look at his thing, love your God with all your heart, soul, and heart, or your mind. And then the second one is love your neighbor as yourself. So he boiled down the 10 Commandments into 2 and said, hey, this is what you do now. If you just keep these 2, then you'll obey everything else. So you can, like I said, I guess you can throw those out the window, because this is a new covenant.
And we don't have to jump through hoops to apply that to ourselves today, do we? Those are 100% aspirational, and they're 100% damning at the same time.
Yep.
So this, you said earlier about a battlefield, which I love. I've been kind of wrestling with this concept of every man has their own battlefield. But one of the things that I've arrived at also, that's going to be the theme through these books, is this book I'm working on now. It's called The Dragon in the Garden. This one that's going to be about the 10 Commandments is going to be the dragon in the desert. The one on the Sermon on the Mount will be the dragon on the mountain. And I'm not sure what the last one, if it's going to be the dragon in Jerusalem, or I don't know what it is, but as I've continued to work through this, I'm going to play some more thought experiments with you, because I just love this stuff. So these 10 words, as I've been seeking them through creation, leads you to Adam and Eve, leads you to the covenant, leads you to these duties and responsibilities of man and woman. And then it also leads me to, what was the fall? What really was the fall? So we're gonna play this thought experiment again. So Dave, what was the first sin?
The first sin? Well, I guess you can look at it a couple different ways. Is Adam gave away his authority to Eve. So,
well, dude, you jumped through everything. That is exactly where I wanted to take you, and good on you. So again, people will talk, it isn't eating an apple or a pomegranate or whatever the fruit was. It certainly isn't eating something. We could argue about pride. I think pride goeth before the fall. So I think pride is a precursor to a sin. A sin is an act. So it was disobedience, right? But many people, and kudos to you, you've landed squarely on Adam. The first sin was Adam not protecting Eve. In the midst of, because again, when people are on this journey, and you already jumped to the conclusion, that next question is, where was Adam when the serpent was speaking to her? And a lot of people don't remember, and because it's just a couple of words. Adam was standing right next to her. So as this serpent is speaking to Eve, Adam's not somewhere else in the garden. He's standing there watching this unfold. He's watching his wife, his mate, the person that was torn out of his body, the other half of him, being led down this path of deception, and he does nothing. That is the first sin. And it's reinforced throughout the Bible, even in Romans, where it says, through one man, sin entered the world. And again, you can have theologians or people tell you, well, the word man in there, it refers to just all of mankind. They don't just mean, no. They mean Adam. Sin entered the world through Adam. Sin did not enter the world through Eve. So what does that mean for men? And if people are hearing this for the first time, and you kind of ruined my journey because you were too learned on this and studied on this, but if you're hearing this for the first time, gentlemen, the first sin that broke the covenant with our Creator is a man not protecting his wife. And the reason I call it the dragon in the garden is I also don't believe it was a serpent. I believe it was a dragon, because there are different Hebrew terms. I won't get into all of that, but really they're using the word serpent, nachish, which really means the shining one, the deceiving one. But tanin means serpent. It means dragon. It means giant sea serpent. It means leviathan. It means dragon. Where throughout the Bible, and especially in the end days, the devil is a dragon. He's not a cute little serpent. So on top of this idea, if you're just hearing this for the first time, that Adam stood there next to his wife, it wasn't a snake, a cute little slithery snake. It was a dragon speaking to his wife, and he said nothing. He intervened at no time. And you talk about every man has his battlefield. Every man has his dragons that he's called to fight. You know, why does the myth of the dragon continue to repeat itself through history, even to the modern day today? Because it's not a myth. The adversary came in the form of a dragon. And when we see him again, he will be in the form of a dragon. And why does every young boy know that he is called to be a knight, to fight dragons and to slay dragons and save the damsel in distress? Because that is our story. And it's the story that we rejected in the garden. And it's the story that we continue to reject today. Men, you are dragon slayers. You are here on this earth to protect what God has given to steward you. And that is oftentimes a spouse. That is oftentimes children. It comes in many, many ways. Maybe it's just to cultivate the garden, but God has called you not to just be a protector, but to be a dragon slayer. And those of you men that are continuing to fight your own internal dragons, get them under control. If it's alcoholism, if it's pornography, if it's greed, if it's pride, if it's ambition, whatever those internal dragons that you are fighting, you've got to get those behind you so you can really face the dragons that are oppressing your wife and your children and the workplace and our nation. We need more men to beat the dragons that are in their bodies, in their minds, and on their shoulders, and get onto that battlefield with the flaming sword of righteousness and the shield and the breastplate and the helmet and the sheaves, all of the things that God has equipped us with. Yeah. And we know it. I hope the men that are hearing this, you're feeling the fire of the Spirit. You are a dragon slayer. And sometimes it looks like the mundane. Sometimes it looks like the plumber who gets up and, the washing machine didn't work. So he's putting on his dirty clothes from the day before, and the coffee maker isn't working, but he is faithfully going to work and slaying the dragons that are before him that day. That to me is heroism.
Jeff, one of my favorite quotes, and I don't know where it came from, but I've used it a number of times. We can't slay the dragon we don't recognize it exists.
Right.
So if we don't recognize that there are dragons, if we don't recognize that we have them, we can't slay them. If you don't recognize it, you can't defeat them. So if you don't know you're in a battle, you never start fighting. And men need to understand that we are in a battle every day. Satan is after your children. Satan is after your wife. He's after your marriage. He's after everything that you hold dear. And what he wants you to do is do nothing. Just sit back. Just sit back.
Guys, take comfort in the fact you're no better or worse than Adam. Adam, this superhuman. I mean, I can't even imagine. Again, I love these extra canonical books. If you've ever read them, like the pseudepigrapha and the apocrypha about what Adam and Eve looked like, they didn't look like us, man. They were divine creatures. You know what I mean? They lived hundreds and hundreds of years. Like this is a skin suit compared to them. Like the reason we talk about superheroes is because they were superheroes, So like, you're not any better or worse than Adam. So take comfort in the fact that you are repeating the first sin, but recognize you're repeating the first sin, and let's go back to the garden again. So here we are. Here's Adam and Eve. They're standing near the tree, the forbidden tree. And here comes this dragon. And I believe, Dave, that it was a dragon, I believe it came out of the water. So this was one of these things. I'm still kind of wrestling. I believe that God has has shown me what I need to know. Because again, this saying, when the dragon is cursed, he's cursed to crawl on his belly, right? And some of us have been told, well, we believe the snake used to have legs. Okay, doubt it. What is the creature that is all through archaeology? The creatures are the sea monsters, the sea creatures, and the flying creatures, the flying dragons. So dragons either have wings, or even the ones in the water can have wings. So I believe very strongly that this dragon, the devil, rolled up in the water, and he's hanging out on the bank, and he's talking to Eve, and Adam's right there. Here we go again. Adam named all the animals. He didn't name this thing. This thing showed up. So either he was familiar with it and knew who it was or what it was, or he was stepping back trying to figure out. But you know, one thing he did know? He knew, I didn't name this thing. Whatever this thing is called, I didn't name it. And if I didn't name it, it's not of God, because God asked me to name all the creatures. So not only, again, the first step is recognizing the dragon that is in your midst. That's the first step. But then the second step is naming it, calling it for what it is, and taking that baby step forward, you know? So, and I would even offer, let's say Eve took a bite of that forbidden fruit. What if Adam would have said, no. It stops here. It stops here. Would that have been a fateful thing? Would that have damned all of eternity? Or did Adam have the ability to forgive Eve? Did God have the willingness to forgive Eve? We'll never know. And then Adam partakes of the forbidden fruit. God, I believe Jesus, I literally believe it was the embodiment of Yeshua, is walking in the garden, and he's calling for Adam and Eve, and they hide. I also believe, Dave, if they would have come to God and said, hey man, we screwed up. We screwed up. I think he would have forgiven them, and we would not be in this place that we are today. But what did they do? They hid. They rationalized. They blamed each other. They never asked God to forgive them. I believe in that story, there was redemption waiting for us. So once again, gentlemen, even if you read this Bible as a myth, as an allegory, fine. But what is it telling you? You have a duty and a responsibility to protect your loved ones, particularly God's crown of creation, which is woman. A man is put on this earth to protect and safeguard women and children. That's your number one. You need to face your own dragons. You need to name the dragon. You need to confront the dragon. And when you screw up, you need to get on your knees and ask the Lord to forgive you and to reinforce you, just like we talked about with Peter. That's the story of our lives. And gentlemen, if we just did those things, the world would be a different place.
Yeah. The only thing that I would say is, you said God may have forgiven them if they had asked for forgiveness, but that was still sin. Wouldn't sin have taken a sacrifice? Wouldn't
Perhaps
have taken a sacrifice? So would Jesus have still had to, I don't know. That's just a thought of that. So, because sin, I can't look on sin.
Yeah. And again, those are things where I want to say with everyone again, these are thought experiments, right? This is not doctrine. Even talking about the 10 Commandments, like, dude, we are sinners. We need a savior. Jesus came to save us. Fall on him. It's that simple. Everything else is like seasoning and excitement. And I don't know the answer to that, Dave. I really don't.
Yeah.
But what God has shown us throughout that story is sometimes there is a requirement for a human atonement. But could it have been a Abraham Isaac situation where it was an animal atonement? I don't know, but I believe strongly there was opportunity for atonement. It wasn't asked for.
Yeah, could be. Again, there's so much we don't know. There's so much that I've got questions, and like you said, there's nothing wrong with thinking things through and asking questions and putting forth
Well,
ideas, as long as you don't deviate from the
yeah.
Savior and the answer to sin was Jesus. I think everything else can be discussed. Everything else can be, disagreed on, actually. So
And that's where I think many of us, especially men, we need to go. There are too many men bored with the Bible story. And you
yeah,
guys, this is the coolest adventure ever. Again, let's just talk about the Garden of Eden for the next 3 months. Like, let's talk about what were Adam and Eve?
yeah,
How did they communicate? What does this mean that they walked with God? How did he name the animals? Did the animals speak? Did they, there's all of this stuff. It's like, gentlemen, because it's all pointing towards where we are today.
yep,
You know what I mean? And one of the things that I landed on, not because God didn't clearly, I have to ask him again, but he didn't clearly show me this was a dragon with wings, or this was a dragon, a sea dragon that sidled up in the water. But you know what he showed me, Dave? He showed me Darwinism.
hmm,
And Darwinism purports that mankind crawled itself out of the sea and grew legs and then evolved from there. So once again, gentlemen, if you're confronted and wrestling with Darwinism and evolution, if the story is God's um, punished the dragon and he dragged him out of the water, which was his domain, and forced him to crawl on his belly in the dust. If that is what happened, it's pretty logical that the great deception in the modern world today is that mankind crawled out of the water, crawled on its belly in the dust, grew legs, and now we are who we are. And
yeah,
if, again, there are people that are listening to this and going, oh, yeah, that's the devil's story. The devil took the form of a beast that God dragged out of the water to walk on the land. So the devil is telling us, oh, this is your story, Dave. This is the story of mankind. You came from the water and then you crawled onto the beach and you grew legs. No, dude, that's your story. That's not my story. My story is I was wonderfully wonderfully made. God formed me in my womb, just like he formed Adam.
yep.
And then he saw that it was incomplete and he made a pair called man and woman. That's not my story. That's your story. But look at how so much of the world is hook, line, and sinker with this evolutionary tale that we crawled out of the sea.
Yeah.
Bro.
Yeah.
That's the devil story, not mine.
Well, he perverts everything. The devil perverts everything. Look at the Antichrist in the end times. There's the dragon again, and
Of course.
and you have its own church, its own savior, everything. And so the devil is always going to pervert everything. Everything. It's amazing. Keep thinking, man. I'm looking forward to your books, but so we got to segue. Let's talk a little bit about Skull Games. So. You said you came out and you segued into this new I guess battle against trafficking and all this other stuff. So how did you settle on the whole trafficking thing? How did you settle on you know what, I'm going to take on this beast to fight?
Like I said before, God called me to it. I was exposed to it throughout the military. The first time I ever even heard of it was in 1989 in the Just Cause invasion, where Noriega had he had dungeons and stables of women and children, adults. It was just this crazy life that he had built for himself because it was unadulterated power, right? And as I traveled throughout the world into the Far East, into Africa, like I saw slavery, I saw sex slavery, I saw the sex industry, but I really equated it with, narco terrorists, you know what I mean? Psychopaths, these weird cultures. I had no idea that it was so prevalent in the United States. I really bumped up against it that people know about with Al Qaeda and ISIS. Like it became, sex slavery became an approved model as you overtook terrain. When the caliphate was announced with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and in Syria and in Western Iraq, the men had the choice to convert or die, and the women were taken as sex slaves. So I understood that this idea existed, but I really put it up on the shelf with just like really extreme behavior. As I began to study it and look at it, it is absolutely at the commercial level in the United States. We are an incredible consumer of sex with children, illicit sex with adults. The economy is controlled, right? Like it is a rare independent prostitute. Again, there's the myth that's created is there's a woman who sees her body as a commodity. She wants to sell her body. I'm a guy who wants to buy and rent her body. We're going to both have a pleasurable experience. God bless America. It just doesn't work that way. 80 to 90% of these women are being controlled and manipulated by a pimp. A pimp and a trafficker are synonymous. Again, I have this discussion with people. Okay. If you're a woman who feels like it's your right to sell your body, you're an adult, you can do what you want. I'm going to sell my body to other men. I'm going to, that's how I'm going to make a living. If that's your mentality, here's my warning. Once you build a clientele, what is stopping a man from taking over your business? Do you think if I'm a pimp and I get wind of a woman who's making $50, $80, $200, $300,000 a year selling her body as an independent prostitute, do you think I fist bump her and recognize that she's an entrepreneur and she's doing great work? No. Yeah. I punch her in the nose. I take over her business. You work for me now. So this idea of an independent is really mythical. It lives on the fringes. It does exist, but it exists in a vacuum because the economy will gobble you up. So there is not independent sex being sold online very often. If it is, it's in these margins really where women have aged out. Prostitution continues well into women's 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. You know what I mean? And a lot of these women that are that old, they don't have a pimp. They don't have a trafficker because he just doesn't care anymore. They're not making the money. But if you're a young woman, and I'm just going to start at 18, there's a lot of minors that are being involved because of the profit margin. But if you're a young woman from the ages of 18 to 30, you are not going to make it as an independent. And you're going to suffer. So those are the people that we're seeking out. We're seeking out these women that are being abused. The economy lives online. You can order up a girl from a website 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So what we do for law enforcement is we identify evidence and indicators of trafficking. Because again, we're not fighting prostitution. We're not going after pimps. We're going after traffickers. Now, are traffickers and pimps synonymous? Yes. Is a prostitute and a victim of trafficking synonymous? Yes. But those things have to be proven in a court of law. So what I tell the layperson is don't jump through hoops to try to figure out if this person you're confronting is a pimp or is he a trafficker. It's the same thing. Leave it up to law enforcement to demonstrate. Or is this woman a prostitute or is she a victim of trafficking? It's the same thing. It's just a point of time in this individual's life. But we have to find that evidence. We have to help law enforcement make cases. And because this is an economy, just like you would go online and order a pizza or order a new pair of shoes or order some new drapes for your office, you can order up a girl at any time. So because this lives on the open internet, we can continue to hunt 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and build these information packets that we push to our trusted partners. We're doing an operation in Oklahoma. What's day today? Tuesday. I think it starts Thursday. We just did an operation in Oklahoma last week. We're operating all over the United States and getting these cops to the point of probable cause, reasonable suspicion, where now they can take the tools of American law enforcement and put that into effect. So when we see enough on the open internet, it drives over the hurdle of probable cause of, hey, judge, look at what we're seeing. We believe very strongly that we've got probable cause, reasonable suspicion that this woman is being trafficked by this guy. Can you give us a warrant to get into his communication devices, into his cell phone, into the apps that he's using to communicate? And once you've crossed that hurdle, dude, it's over, because these guys are not even barely speaking in code with what it is that they're doing to these women. So that's the market that we're fighting. It's largely a boring technical fight online. It's hundreds of geeks, Intel geeks that are part of Skull Games. But they all have a very heroic and selfless passion and purpose to protect these women and children.
So do you guys participate in the ops on the ground? Do you supply guys for that as well?
So Intel people. So we have law enforcement guys on staff. So the guy who is in Oklahoma right now, he's training law enforcement in the advanced techniques that we use. It's a bit of economy of force and how to make the charges stick and making sure everything's working well. And then we will coach mentor them through an operation. So we don't make the arrest. We don't have arrest authority. We have cops that are badged and can carry a gun and can act as another policeman on site. But really, it's a coaching, mentoring situation. So oftentimes we are there in the planning phase. We are there in the hotel rooms or wherever it is that we're conducting the operation. We usually have a cop and an intel person, but there are also times where we are supporting operations virtually. Because just like you and I are talking, we don't have to be in the room. I think we're working in Arizona right now. I think we're working in California as we speak. I think we're engaging with law enforcement in both of those states, building cases, and working operations. So both on the ground, which is limiting, right? We only have so many people. That's a finite space and time. But working virtually, that's how we are able to expand really our reach. Awesome. In a couple of weeks, we're going to Brazil. It's the first time that we're looking at some international issues. I was called to confront this crime in the United States, and that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years, very diligently. Domestic counter-sex trafficking. You can find this crime all over the world. It's a lot easier to combat in other places in the world because of the different laws and systems. Again, I can go to a country in Southeast Asia as long as I have enough money. I can rent a police force. I can rent a judge. I can rent a prosecutor, and we can work these cases. It doesn't work that way in the U.S. You don't rent cops. You don't rent judges. You don't rent prosecutors. You have to work within the confines of the law and what's admissible into court, etc. So that's really what we've mastered. We've mastered how to do American counter-sex trafficking. That model can be picked up and laid over any country that has an online aspect to their trafficking economy. So yeah, we're going to hit Brazil and see if we can start supporting some of the efforts there. That's brand new of this year, where we're starting to expand and rebrand ourselves into an international component.
Wow. So you just answered, I think, 4 of my questions in that. So that was good. So is there one story, if you want to tell my audience of one success story, one story that would just seems about what you guys do? One, for instance, that would just kind of wrap up what you guys are able to do
Yeah. A lot of ideas come flooding in. So, because the traffickers control so many aspects of these victims. And what I mean by that is it's akin to domestic abuse, right? Like, why doesn't a wife leave her husband who's beating her? Well, because she doesn't feel like she has an exit. She doesn't feel like she has any options. You know what I mean? What's going to happen to her children? All these kinds of things. That's the game that these traffickers play. Quite often they have children on purpose with their victims, because now that child is being held as collateral, right? Almost quite literally in ransom. So when you confront a victim and you say, let's say one of the things that is very, very simple win for us is putting a true identity to this girl. Okay. So maybe the girl is called Candy. Her name is Candy on the sex ad. She's been She's been sold for sex for 3 years. She's 20 years old now. It started when she was 17. She only is called Candy. Nobody calls her by her real name, but we are able to find out what this girl's real name is, and her name is Sarah Johnson. So when we offer these women a way out, Dave, just calling them by their name is mind-boggling to them. Like you can almost see like a glitch in the matrix where it's like, how do these people know my name? And you can see this flood of emotion and memory because they've been living this fake persona, and the trafficker wipes that away. So even just to put a name to these girls is a huge win. But you have to catch them in a time where they're ready to come out, they've got the courage to come out, and the conditions are set. So there really are wins when we're able to help pull a woman out. There are wins when we're able to help put a trafficker away. Those are very, very obvious wins. But one of the things I'm really proud of is incorporated into our task force, we have these women that we call survivor hunters. So they've come out of the life and they're engaged with skull games, and now they are giving back, and they're being that hunter and that protector that they didn't have. And one of my good friends, Candace, who's a survivor out of Kansas City, when she tells her story, she says, and we were just together in Virginia doing a task force event. And when she finds out the name of a girl, she has to take a minute. She has to walk out of the room and she has to cry and she has to say a prayer, because for 25 years, Candace wasn't Candace. She was all these other names. So like that's the first step of that hope, is we have identified this girl. And quite often, Dave, there are so many, it's such a cyclical battle. There's so much space to go that those are the wins we grab onto. It's like I said before, you get in the cage, right? And the door locks behind you. You don't know if you're going to win or lose. Sometimes you get knocked out. Sometimes you get subbed. I'm not there. I'm not in the cage to win. I'm in the cage to fight valiantly, and that's that first step, is when we can identify a girl and put a name to it, understand what her life story is, and then understand who's manipulating and exploiting her, and try to put our chess moves on the board to offer her an exit and trap this trafficker. It's unbelievable.
I was interviewing Farrell Brown, who's a really good friend of mine. He's starting a new nonprofit going after giving the girls a place to stay. And he said the same exact thing you said. He said, these girls are not them, or have not had the freedom, but been able to go in and just say, hey, I want a cherry croissant rather than a blueberry croissant, getting to make a choice that's their own. He said, that's what I want to offer these girls. And then whenever they finally say, hey, I want out, having the avenue to get them out. So he's opening up a house in Miami, his first one. And it's just going to have, it's be staffed by women and clean towels, shower, place to sit, place to get a cup, coffee, or eat a pastry, eat something, but just to get away and to be able to be themselves again for a minute. He's hoping that will bridge the gap between getting these girls out, because he's seen that, because he spent the last, I think, 2 years in Miami on the streets trying to reach these girls and trying to, get them out. And he said this is what he saw the need was, and God put it in his heart, just like in your heart, to do this. And you talk about guys who you've been around, who you trust. Farrell's that guy for me. Farrell and I've been we're brothers. And watching him, I'm going to he's rolling it out this next weekend to finally start all the pieces, and I'm going to his first meeting this weekend, and excited about it. I think he will. Nobody will work harder than Farrell. Nobody will work more religiously as Farrell, and nobody will be more upfront than Farrell will as what he's trying to do. And what you just said was just right along exactly what he said, and why God put him where he's putting him, because he was, he had a job at a nonprofit, Street Grace. He was working with them,
Yeah.
and he just said God wouldn't leave him alone, wouldn't let him stay there. He pulled him out. So now he's working a full-time job outside of this while he's doing the nonprofit. So, he felt that strongly. So, he's a buddy of mine, but he said the exact same thing you did. And
well, put us in touch, because where we're a complement to what he's doing is we partner with law enforcement, so we help them develop these cases. We help them understand the victimology. There aren't a lot of places in America still that look at these women as hoes or prostitutes or sluts or hookers. Like that terminology is largely gone. Because that terminology is we understand what's happening now, like a lot of law enforcement. So it's still a little bit in that space, but we help the cops understand that these are victims. These aren't women doing this of their own accord. It gets very messy very fast, because part of the game is the traffickers force these women to commit crimes, right? Like that's, they force them to carry drugs. They force them to do all sorts of crimes. So in many ways they have a rap sheet. That's part of the trap that they build. So we try to help educate law enforcement what this crime looks like. And then really we're trying to help them get to these cases faster. So if when we're with Miami, we aren't working in Miami right now, but please put us together, and we would love to connect with law enforcement there. And the perfect world is we're working in concert with law enforcement, and the end result are these women that are choosing a path to freedom, and they end up at his place, and then they begin that cycle of recovery. One of the things that I equate this to is back during Mogadishu with Black Hawk Down, Durant was the pilot. So Durant was one of the crashes. There was a number of crashes. But Michael Durant, he survived the crash. Everyone else on the crash died. And the mob, the Somali mob beat up Michael, and they took him captive, and they started negotiating on which warlord was going to purchase him. And he got moved to a couple of different places, and the American forces were looking for Michael. Like we didn't know where he was. Like we lost track of him. He was somewhere in Mogadishu, but we didn't know where. And I think they show this in the movie. I don't remember Black Hawk Down. I don't remember if they showed this in the movie, but the best we could do, Dave, was fly around this giant city of Mogadishu with loudspeakers saying, Michael Durant, we haven't forgotten you. Michael Durant, we're looking for you. Michael Durant, we love you. Michael Durant, hang in there. Michael Durant, live to fight another day. And when you talk to Mike, he heard that, dude. He heard that loudspeaker, and it gave him the courage and the confidence. He had bullet holes. He had a broken back. He didn't know what was happening. He was just lying in a room, like waiting to die. And it helped him to get his wits about him and live to fight another day. And I don't expect, God works in miraculous ways. I don't think there's a lot of trafficking victims listening to this podcast. But one of the things we're trying to demonstrate with Skull Games and even the Flame and the Light is, ladies, we don't know where you are. We might not even know who you are, but we love you. We care about you, and we're looking for you, and we're coming for you. And if your exploiters make a mistake, we'll find you. So please live to fight another day. Have the courage to hang in there, because suicide is such a huge part. Just giving up, because they're just so buried in the mire of all this. So one of the things about Skull Games, we have very practical metrics on how many people we've assisted in recovery, how many people we've assisted in arresting and prosecuting. But an even more simple piece than that is this idea of hang in there, women, hang in there, girls. There are people who care. Your name will be returned to you. And I remember there were times when victims have asked us, why are you here? Why did you care about me? And the answer is, it's the one who sent me. Jesus loves you, man. I know. And he's here with you. He's in the middle of your pain, and he's suffering alongside of you. And all we ask is you live one more day for him to be able to bring you rewards in this life. And if that isn't the ending, it's the rewards in the afterlife. Because these women and children that suffer, Dave, They will be living in mansions that you and I can only look at from a distance on top of that hill because of what they had to suffer here on this plane.
Yeah. So I know you've got some places you got to be. So let's try to land this plane, man. This has gotten dark quick. But in this realm, there's nowhere else it can go. But so this is built toward men, you know, and I've asked this of every guy I've had on here. If you could say one thing to the men who are listening here when it comes to their walk and what they can do and how to be a hero or about trafficking, whatever you want to say, what is one thing you'd want to say to the men who are listening today?
I think it goes back to what we said before. We all have dragons to face. Some of those dragons we've allowed into our homes. Some of those dragons we've allowed into our minds. Some of those dragons we've allowed into our search habits on the internet. Some of those dragons we've allowed into the workplace. We are created to fight these dragons, and woman is the crown jewel of creation. When God created woman, that's what he ended with. Like, he created all of the universe and it still was missing something. So the woman is the crown jewel. She is the masterpiece of creation. So you have to understand this war we're in, like you said, Dave, the battlefield that we're in is to take God's crown jewel. And this crown jewel is the thing that provides life. You and I don't birth children. This woman, this crown jewel, that's the most beautiful thing that God created, the one thing that makes a man whole in his being, and she's the one that creates life. So if you were an adversary, the shining one, the deceiver, and you were creating a strategy to harm God, to harm man, to whittle away at God's creation, who would you attack? Women. You'd attack women and you would attack children. And who would you use to do it? Man. We are being played like checkers, guys. You're being played like checkers. We are consuming women. We are overlooking our children. We are not confronting the dragons. Yeah. Recognize what your wife is. Recognize what your daughter is. Recognize what women are in this planet. They are the creators of life. They are the nurturers of life. They are the crown jewel of creation. And it is your responsibility to protect them, provide them, and be that priestly example that they also need. None of us can do this perfectly. One person has. His name is Yeshua. It's who we aspire to be like. Yeah. But it's never too late to start. It's never too late to dust off your sword. All of you have a sword, and it's a book. It's a book called the Bible, and it is sharp. Yeah. Get in that Bible. Get in that quiet space. Ask for a renewal of the spirit and the confidence to walk boldly in who God created you to be, and be that man, be that Adam who coulda, woulda, shoulda, step between Eve and the dragon eons ago, because we're just repeating that same failure over and over.
Yeah. So let me ask you one more question. And this is something I've tried to circle back with the guys. Is there any victimless pornography out there?
No. And again, you're creating your own, you're distorting yourself. You know what I mean? So the demand is huge. Like it's a gateway into trafficking. So again, if I recognize a woman who is purposefully, intentionally selling herself on OnlyFans or getting involved in pornography, and I'm a predator, she's already told me she's put a price on her body. You know what I mean? Like she's already told me she's past that line of my body is for sale, but I'm the one who's selling it. Okay. Prime pickings. If you want to find where the predominant victims reside in the open, it's at strip clubs, and it's in pornography. So it is absolutely a feeder drug. People have to be acutely aware of what they're doing to their minds with pornography these days. When you and I grew up, there was Playboy, right? It was the female body. That's a natural thing. God has built us to be excited and turned on by the female body. That is an innate biological thing, right? But what has happened of late is we've created even these heavily distortions. Pornography today is not just the women's body. It's a level of degradation. There's this weird incest thing. Like I have to kind of study pornography, so to speak, to understand where this crime is going and what buyers are asking for. And there's this weird, if you don't know this, Dave, there's this weird incest thing over pornography. It's mother, daughter, mother, son, father, daughter, uncle, cousin, stepbrother. There's all this weird, like, layering thing that chips away at these innate resistances that we have. There's degradation, there's choking, there's spitting, there's defecating and urinating on people. It's all become part of a sexuality, a sex that God created not only for life, but he created this as an incredible union between man and woman. There's a reason sex is incredibly pleasurable. God made it that way. It's something we're supposed to share with our partners. But when you introduce choking and spitting and degradation, something is being distorted. So, men, it's not a victimless crime because you're turning yourself into a victim. You're being slowly manipulated to being aroused by things that you wouldn't otherwise be aroused by. And it's a long, slippery slope. So it's a danger for anybody to work into that space. To go back to the obvious, many of these women are then further exploited over time. And it's such, I wish we would look at this as a women's health issue. It's kind of a women's rights issue where it's the predominant, or one of the opinions in America is it's the women's right to sell her body. It's her body. She can do with it what she wants. Okay. That's a women's right. But if that's going to be your platform, then what happens when a man controls that right? Like, you should be doubly pissed off when you find out that a man is controlling this other female. And a pimp trafficker has it usually the average, a stable of 5 to 6 girls he's running. So you have a man who's controlling the bodies, the minds, and the sexual proclivity of 5 or 6 women. That's a women's rights issue. The women's health issue. Dude, there is not a demographic on the planet that suffers from more PTS, from more trauma, from more mental illness than these women that are wrapped up in sex trafficking and even starting with pornography. It isn't the way God made things. It's not the way he ordained things. For women that want out, reclaim your bodies, reclaim your status as a crown jewel of creation. Men that want out, humble yourselves and recognize, is that what a knight does? Is that what does a knight abuse women virtually for his own self-pleasure? I don't think so. It's a dragon that has snuck into your house. It's snuck into your mind. It's snuck into your habits, and it needs to be addressed.
Amen. Amen. Jeff, thank you, brother. This has been very, very good, and not where I thought it would go. We went to a whole different place for a long time. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that conversation, man. You brought a lot out, and I think you brought a lot to our men to feast upon. So, thank you, brother. Very good.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And again, guys, have the courage to talk like men. Look at the battles of the Bible. Look at the men and the women in the Bible, and look for these stories. Let David be who he was, an archetype of Yeshua, but also let him be this mythological mythological character that has life lessons for us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Moses' story. All let the Bible come to life. These men's studies, like, oh man, just be bold. Like I said, when I say the 10 Commandments is dumb, you know what I'm talking about. You don't think about the 10 Commandments are not what we're wrestling with. Do not look at porn is not part of the 10 Commandments. You know what I mean? Like, is that part of adultery? Is it part of coveting? Yes, it can fit It can fit underneath one of those 10 commandments. But when you go back to creation, and you go back to creation where God tore Adam in half and created a woman that was his masterpiece, that's what he wants you to pay attention to. You don't have to fit pornography under adultery or under covetousness or the fact that you're lying to get away with it. All that's fine. Go back even further to the base of creation on how he built this beautiful garden that our job is to bring back. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We pray this all the time. And gentlemen, I want you to focus that on earth. If you are not bringing heaven to earth today, that's our job. Heaven is not in the afterlife. Heaven is now. God, we are already eternal beings. This skin suit's going to fade away. It's already wearing out. I've got all sorts of steel in my body. I'm a half robot just to keep on going. Like this body is going to cease to exist, but Jeff is going to continue on in the supernatural space. Jeff is trying to bring heaven to earth today. So guys, stop looking at the afterlife as afterlife. No, it's after this life. You pray this, focus on that phrase, on earth as it is in heaven. Bring God's kingdom, bring God's creation, try to replicate what he created in the garden today as you go out on a plumbing job, or you go out on a construction job, or you're going out as a teacher, or you're going out as a lawyer. Bring God's kingdom to earth today. That's what he's asked us to do. That's what he's tasked us to do. And that concept of protector, provider, and priest, those are the three roles that you always need to look at as your duty and your responsibility, and pray that God and Jesus and his Spirit will walk alongside you, because he will. He does not fail. He may remain silent for some time, but he won't remain silent for 400 years. And rarely in this day does he ask us to wander in the desert for 40 years. If you can last 40 minutes, if you can last 40 days, he will come to you and he will walk alongside you, and he will open up the life that he is asking you very specifically and uniquely to live.
Amen. Amen. Jeff, thank you, brother. Guys, this has been a great conversation today. Hope you enjoyed it. And until next week, walk with him. See ya.